Hi, everybody. Hey, it's Donna Reed in Tucson from Up With People Cast 76A. And I want you all to know that I purposely turned my computer today so that you could see those colorful cactus painted right up there in that painting, just in case, so that the Cactus Lounge has some cactus per Paul Caldwell. So today I have a guest who I only know through mutual friends, don't know well. And Darlene, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live, and then tell us what your name was when you traveled, in case it's a different name now.
Sure. Well, my name is Darlene Bessey, and I live in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in Canada. And I have never changed my name, so it's the same. And I traveled for one semester with Cast C in 1977. And then I went on staff Up With People and remained on staff till 1981. So that's my involvement.
So one semester and then came back. So 77 was right after me. Who were your like cast managers or whatever we called them then?
Yeah. So it was Tim Lane.
Okay.
And Kathy Ray DePhillips, who unfortunately passed away several years ago. Yeah. So Kathy Ray was like, promotions manager and assistant cast director. Pat Berry, yes, Pat was the show manager, I believe. Gosh, we had Phil Wooster, I think, in there as well. So Billy Holmes was our tech person. Yeah. So Billy passed away. So it's my 45th reunion coming up. Yeah, so I'm going to be attending.
Exciting.
And this particular cast is has sort of a core group of maybe 30 people who are extremely close.
Nice.
And they meet very regularly, and I would say every 2 years at minimum. And I usually only meet, and I have never done their pre-reunion, but I am going this year for a couple of days.
That's right. You told me you were coming down a little earlier.
Okay. So they always do that. And, my experience was kind of broader. I do like to go to the larger reunion, and because I have lots of, colleagues and other casts as well. I did in 79D, I was the assistant cast director and promotions manager for first semester with that cast, which had a cast director of Scott Dupay.
Okay.
He's Canadian. Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, he is, Darlene. So, I always talk to him on LinkedIn. And so I sent him a message and I go, Scott, are you still working or have you retired? And he messaged me back and I said, are you still coming to Phoenix? And he said, yeah. And he was the first person that we hosted. He did PR and stayed with me his first year. So he was the first Up With People person that I met. And and so I told him, I'm only coming up for Saturday, but we have to at least grab a drink. We have to at least say hi,
Absolutely. So I had dinner with him and Barb, his wife, just a month ago in Calgary. So because I went to a reunion of 79D, which was held at Camp Horizons in June.
Okay. Is that the cast that Retta also was there?
That's correct. Yeah, Retta was there. And so Retta and I went, and it was great. Larry Swenson and John Hall with his generous, he provided his camp, and
you guys are lucky because we're going there in October for our cast, and Retta, I'm going to fly out and drive up with Retta and Beth Abernathy.
Oh, wonderful.
And
that'll be fun.
But John didn't travel with us, so I'm sure we're not going to get quite all the perks that you guys
did, so. Well, I don't know about that, but he is, he's just incredibly generous, and I'm generous to anything related to Up With People.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Yeah.
All right. So you traveled and you worked, and did you meet your husband on the road, or did you meet him back at home?
No, back home. Yeah. I was just a few months short of being 40 when I got married.
Okay.
So so I did a bunch of other things, and
how old were you when you traveled?
I was older, so my history is quite a bit different maybe than the traditional cast member. I was 24.
Okay.
And I was actually interviewed by Pat Berry, and in 1976, And, you know, I know you have some questions you want to ask me. I'm probably sort of going on,
It's fine.
with respect to answering some of them along the way. But, I first saw it with people in 1968 when they came to my
Oh,
city when I was in high school. And as you probably know, at that time, SingOuts were created.
right.
So it was really SingOut that had the most impact on my life, even more than being in Up With People. Up With People was a tremendous experience, and I learned a great deal. I gained experience which helped me and many of the other things that I did after I left Up With People. I love Up With People. I'm probably also one of its greatest critics. And I can talk about that a little bit, I guess. I also, SingOut became a vehicle for me to locally to. I'm not a singer or a performer, absolutely not, but I was part of that entity, and at a very formative stage of my life as
Right.
sort of a teenager still, and we had a very strong community service component, and that's what attracted me. And my career has essentially been in international development, and also which I would say is international cooperation, and also community development. And so that's largely my career. So that's kind of was my interest from the beginning, and Up With People, SingOut facilitated that. I wanted to be part of the Up With People high school program.
Okay.
But my parents just could not afford to send me. They were also a little reluctant, given my age and all that. But at any rate, that didn't work out. And then, so I did a lot of things before I came to Up With People. I actually have an associate's degree. We don't have that term, but I know it's a term in the U.S. in social work. And I sort of started working at a pretty young age. And then I was also a volunteer in India for 6 months prior to my time in Up With People. So
Okay.
I had that experience with an organization called Canadian Crossroads, which I am still involved with today. And then I saw Up With People. I've always liked the philosophy of Up With People. I was attracted to joining the program when I was 24. I
Right.
left a good job to do that, but I was also came at the time that Up With People wanted to broaden its engagement in Canada.
Okay.
And so I was accepted to travel, but with a discussion around, maybe I might like to work with Up With People in terms
Of setting up Canada.
yeah. So, I did the staging, didn't stay long though. I think I was there maybe 3 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks. And then I, went out on PR. So I was, yeah.
But it's funny to hear some of these stories, because it makes me think back to some of the people in our cast who we don't have as many pictures. We don't, there's things that we don't remember as well. And they're like, oh yeah, I was always on PR. And that tended to be those who are a little older. I was 18, literally turned 18 June 28th, and then left Up With People for July 6th. Yeah. So a very different experience. And my son, if you listen to the other ones, Darlene, so I interviewed Caleb, and Caleb was 26. And so even though he had the same experience, it wasn't the same experience. And interviewing my own son, I found out how many times he was housed alone because of being older. And that, I didn't know that. And that was kind of fascinating to me, about how they were like, oh yeah, you had some life experience, and they felt like it was trusted. So you telling your story, I know others now, and I can think back on, yeah, that's why that person wasn't with us as much, because they were out doing PR or setting up cities or doing things like that. So tell me, clearly you had the service piece that was important to you. You said that, and that's moved through, and that's affected your whole life. And I think Brenda Moran said, to me, yeah, you need to talk to her. That's part of what, who she is. I want to know, because, you had said you didn't marry till you were 40ish, and I know you adopted your daughter. Tell us about that. Tell us about.
Okay, sure. Well, I had, when I left Up With People, I did work that took me, to India and Pakistan, and I was very engaged in sort of international cooperation, but it was also, youth, a youth program. I also then was involved. I sort of reached a point in my early 30s where I was always traveling. And I did have a home base here in my home city, but I traveled a lot in Canada and outside. So I just was feeling the need to sort of kind of settle. It was a time when, my parents or my friends didn't call me. I had to call them because they never knew if I was home, right? So anyway, I was very fortunate. I applied and was hired to be the CEO of our local YWCA. So that was a fabulous opportunity for me. I am very strong feminist and activist, and I would say, in terms of women's rights. So it was a very good fit. So it was through that work that I met my husband.
Okay.
And we were actually on the opposite side of an issue locally. Yes, he was. I was the director of a YWCA that had been around for many years. It opened its doors in 1911, but it opened a brand new building in 1985. And the city of Saskatoon, municipalities across Canada were also opening pools, and they were starting to put us out of business. And so he was a senior executive with our city, and he oversaw that whole program. So we, as an organization, decided, sort of to take on the city and say, you're putting us out of business. It's not your job as a municipality to be, endangering a charitable organization, right? So anyway, so that went back and forth and so on. So anyway, that all resulted in us taking our relationship in a different route after a while. So we got married, kind of had our first date in September, and we're engaged by December. So I think, he's older than I am by 4 years. So I'd never been married. So I think, at that age, you kind of know, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's been wonderful. We, and things, as you get older, it becomes many women have children in their 40s, but that wasn't possible for me. So for us, we pursued an international adoption. So we went to China, adopted our wonderful daughter. She's now 24. So I'm 69, my husband's 73. All of our friends are having grandchildren. Some of their grandchildren are, graduating now from, school.
I understand.
And we're preparing now our daughter's going to graduate school in the UK in the fall. So that's a big deal. And so that's our life, right? And it very much focuses on her, and we're both retired.
Zoe, right?
Is that Zoe, that's right.
Yeah.
And she went to Camp Up With People for 2 years. Yeah, which was great. And she's like her mother, not interested in being on stage, but she tried as much as possible to be, working on the tech side and the lights and sound. That was her interest. And interestingly enough, Tim Lane was the camp director for both of those.
Oh, that's right. He was. Yeah.
And she had, I've gone to reunions for a long time. Ken and Zoe have come with me for many years. And so she knew Tim and so on. But she had no interest in traveling. It was kind of more, the performing arts side, the technical side. She's a musician. She's quite a talented violinist, and plays the sax, but violin is her thing. So
So it's interesting again. So because I have 3 boys, and my youngest traveled kind of at a place in his life where he needed to do something different, but the next older, my middle son, we went and saw him perform in Magdalena in Mexico. And that was the first time that he had experienced Up With People through the eyes of a younger person, instead of just through mom's eyes, because it was always mom and her friends, and she did this thing and, you know, whatever. It was never anything that he felt like was part of his world. And then after going with his little brother, who at the time was already, as I said, 26. So they were 26 and 29. He was like, oh, okay. You know, I get this.
Sure.
Not about to apply and travel. And it's always interesting for me, for all the staff members, you know, that when Up With People left Tucson and went to Denver, and how many of the children traveled and how many of them didn't, and how those kids were friends because their parents were in the office. And simultaneously, Tim and I've met his kids, how they said they already kind of felt like they did it because mom and dad had done it and everybody they knew.
Sure.
So it's fascinating to hear that. So Darlene, from through the years, are there songs that still touch your soul, whether or not you loved being on stage performing them?
Oh yeah, right. I mean, I still always, am taken by, the music and the show, and, it still, is quite impactful. Yeah, I think for me, probably Rhodes was a pretty strong, major one that I'll still have going through my mind sometimes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think give the children back their, children was a powerful one. We had in 77, first, I think, cast that had, participants from Ireland, and
that could be,
three people in the 77 cast. And, that was a very powerful song for them, I would say, because of course
what was happening. It feels like, I don't know what the next incarnation of Up With People is going to be. But it feels like in our world, that is a song that's still relevant. And as I do these interviews, and only because of reunions, because I only traveled the 1 year, right? So yes, we did children and some of those, but and I loved Save the Dancer. I don't know if that was still in your show, but what's happening in the world, like Give the Children Back Their Childhood, feels like we could just keep singing it, and Moonrider, there's certain songs that just are timeless. And,
that's right.
For better or worse, I mean, you think, gosh, these words still matter so much. And
they do. Yeah.
I talked with Paul a little bit about that, about the writing process. And I gave him kind of a hard time about some songs that were in our show that I thought were silly. And he goes, well, they can't all be top hits.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And I'm like, okay, I get that. But then he explained kind of his reason for for why they wrote those songs. I'm like, oh, okay. But when you're 18, whatever, people flash back in time, and then you go, oh yeah, that's what was happening. That's why that makes sense. So yeah.
Right.
What in your travels and experience in Up With People, was there a place that you went that you loved more than any, or that you would love to go back to, a place? And you can't say Italy because everybody says Italy. Okay.
Yeah. Well, my experiences, because my time in Up With People was largely spent, I lived in Tucson for 2 years of that time.
Okay.
But close to 2 years, about a year and a half, I guess, was spent scheduling. And so I scheduled almost all of the Canadian tours, and so then in 79, the reason why I traveled, as the PR and marketing person with that cast was because I had scheduled their Canadian tour.
Okay.
And so, and that was just up until Christmas. And so then after Christmas, I think they went to Bermuda or something like that. Yeah. So after Christmas that year, I moved to Tucson. And I do love Tucson. I do. And
a lot of people do.
It's a special place for me. For sure. And of course, knowing other people who live there is it's always fun to go there. And then, I spent time in, some areas of the US. And so I would say that, Baton Rouge and
Oh,
Louisiana were pretty neat places. And I, I have had the chance to go to New Orleans a few times since traveling. So
because
um,
it's such a different world than where you live. Like, what do you think?
yeah, and yeah, absolutely, it's interesting,
Yeah,
but um, yeah, it is interesting, I guess.
yeah,
That's all I could say about it. And it has a sort of that French as well, right? And
right, right.
yeah, it's just and the south of the U.S. is fascinating, right? I mean, I must say the whole all the racial history and justices
Mhm,
and so on. I mean, I
mhm.
find very interesting, and
Yeah,
with the social justice sort of
I
situation. So
I was talking to
not
some.
just there, right?
Yeah, no, all over. You're right, but I think that for me, again, going back to being an 18-year-old, I was talking to someone the other day, and he was sort of laughing about my hometown, and I was like, "Why are you laughing?" And he goes, "Because you've said there were 500 people there, and it was settled by 9 German settlers, and you were all white." And I'm like, "You're right." And I had no control over that, right? So you leave, you learn, you grow, you change. And
Right.
and has it evolved over time? Of course. Is it still predominantly settled by white German people with 100?
Hmm.
Yeah, there
Hmm.
is, right? And I said, but simultaneously there are places in the country and then in the world that are entirely opposite. And you don't know unless you go, right? You
That's
don't
right.
know unless you
No, that's
you
right.
pay attention
That's
and you
right.
learn.
No, for
So
sure.
yeah.
For sure. And we all come from places that, that have their histories,
Right.
I think in histories that,
Yeah.
like I live in a part of Canada that has the highest percentage, I guess, per capita of First Nations people. So
Really.
Indigenous people. So it's a place where, graves of children are now being found at the residential
Oh, I
schools,
remember
so
starting to hear
so
about.
it's profound issue here, and reconciliation is a big part of all of our lives,
Right.
and we need to recognize the past, and
Yeah.
continue to work on creating a more equitable future. And the First Nations people that I know that are very active in reconciliation, take the position of, yes, your ancestors, yes, are responsible for colonization in this situation.
Mhm.
You yourself are not, but you have a responsibility to
Right.
make it better, right? And so that's sort
Yeah.
of, I think, where many of us are at. I mean, there's
Yeah.
certainly many difficult situations. There's certainly racism is prevalent, but
Right.
I think there are a lot more people committed to, justice and reconciliation than ever before.
So this morning, one of my friends is in Kenya right now, and she's there for 5 weeks, and she's working with the Maasai,
Mm.
with people that she had met a long time ago. We have 10 minutes left. And she was talking to me, via Facebook Messenger about what she's learning. And she used the word marginalized. And I wrote her and I said, it's interesting to me because as a person living here, having traveled to a reasonable number of countries compared to many people, I don't think about the Maasai as being marginalized because I don't think about it at all. And because it's all of Africa. So I said, so is that what I need to learn? Is that what I need to think about? Do I need to think about those pieces that have never entered my vision even, right? To think about.
Mhm.
And when I have friends that say, oh, you can read about it in a book or you don't need to go, and I'm like, it's not the same. It's
Mhm.
not the
Mhm.
same until you go. And Mona Bowie said in one of hers, when the places become the faces. And I think that for those of us that have traveled and lived, and clearly you've worked and traveled all over, it makes a difference in who we
It
are. And
does. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
so,
Yeah,
yeah. All right. One
absolutely.
last question before we finish up. So, or I guess two quick ones. What food did you learn to eat along the way that you love or hate?
Oh, gosh. I don't think there is anything, quite frankly. I mean, one of the outstanding meals I would say was in Baton Rouge, I think about a number of host families got together and did like a crayfish boil or something like,
Oh,
and
fun.
coming from the prairies, that's a, pretty neat experience. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but that's probably, again, as I said, my experience was largely US and Canada. So,
Okay, okay.
yeah, yeah.
So, and if you were going to talk to a 20-year-old right now, us again, not knowing what Up With People looks like, how it moves forward, from a gap year, take the time, travel, what would you say to that kid?
Yeah. Well, I would say that, it is an opportunity to develop really, leadership skills, because I think that's a strong part of what Up With People has done. In an environment that, gives you an opportunity to meet young people from many different countries, gives you the opportunity to travel, and to learn about yourself,
That's important.
and to really, hopefully look at kind of the world, and how you can maybe impact change. I think there are a lot of programs, right? I mean, that's
Right.
that's what's different from when you and I were involved.
Correct.
So I think, Up With People always has to, like, how does it differentiate itself
Right.
in that so-called market?
Yeah.
And so it is probably the musical production, that does
think
that.
made the difference.
Right. And so, so I would say that I think, you need to be able to appreciate that and to want to participate in that. I think if that's something that you don't really want to do, there are probably, quite frankly, other programs.
Another program that would serve you better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's assuming we move forward. I say we with a musical.
I know.
With a musical
Yeah.
program. We don't.
That's
none of us
right.
know. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
So,
Absolutely.
all right. Well, I need to wrap it up.
Okay.
And, one of the things about having the free version of Zoom is that I can't make these an hour long. So
Yeah.
otherwise I'd probably just keep talking.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do pay my $20 a month or whatever.
I
did
probably
a lot
should
of work on it. So
yeah. I have
that's
to tell you, by the way, so I went and put on the tie-dye t-shirt because one of my friends sent me a tie-dye shirt. He died this morning, an Up With People friend.
Oh,
But also because I wore this when I was a host mom and I was picking up people from different countries. And I wrote numbers, their numbers in their language, except that I messed up the Flemish.
okay.
So this is still buried in my file. And I was like, I'm going to pull my tie-dye on today.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
So
Opportunity
anyway,
to wear it. Yeah.
thank you for your time. I appreciate it. I look forward. I'm going to come up on Saturday. I'm just going to hang around.
Hopefully I'll see you.
Yeah, during the that's the Air Show day when people are kind of milling around. So
Right.
I'm just coming up for that one day, but hopefully I'll see you.
Okay. Well, I'll be there. Okay.
Alrighty.
Hopefully
I
we
will
can see each
stop
other.
the recording, Darlene.